Hello everyone, this video will contain some minor spoilers for Abzu, so if you care about that kind of thing, I suggest you play the game first. This video will also contain several minutes of me talking about things that are not Abzu but are still important to the overall point. If you just want to hear me talk about Abzu, then skip to this time here. Shout out to the channel Games from Mars for letting me use their footage. The definition of art is quite possibly one of the most contentious throughout all of human history. What does and does not count as art has been debated as long as the word itself was introduced into our vernacular. In fact, the debate about whether art has or even should have a definition is as prominent as the debate about the definition itself. And while I personally think that definitions are useful, I can understand others' reluctance to pin something down so definitively. Art is so prolific and so interpretive that it almost feels pointless to even try and define it. Someone is always going to say that something is art to them while it may appear to be trash to someone else. Whereas a debate about food, for example, will most likely yield a lot less discussion about what does and doesn't count as food, as there is an inherently scientific component involved. After all, what's digestible by our bodies and by our brains are two different things entirely. The point I'm trying to make here is that this stuff is complicated and no one really has the answers. For me, art takes a spot on the list of things which are defined by the phrase, you know it when you see it, or to be more accurate in this case, you know it when you feel it, because that word right there, feel, is what I believe to be the crux of this issue. Allow me to give you my own definition of art. I define art as the means by which people creatively express their own thoughts and feelings through a variety of mediums and methods, which are then intended to be appreciated for their aesthetic beauty and emotional impact. This definition might be too broad for some people's palate, but to me that's entirely the point. In this day and age where so many things can and should be considered art, it's important that we update our definitions to include all the new ways that people are finding to express themselves. As long as something was made for the purpose of creative expression and can evoke an emotional reaction from a viewer, which basically anything can depending on the person, then I think it's perfectly acceptable to call it art. Now, I'm not really looking to get into the nitty-gritty details that go along with the discussion about art analysis and philosophy. There are so many schools of thought that I'm not qualified to speak on, so I just won't. What I am interested in is talking about purpose. Although the definition of art can be debated day and night, I do think there's another aspect that most people can find some common ground on, that being the purpose of art. In my own humble opinion, at its core, when you remove all the bells and whistles, art is about evoking a feeling. This can be rephrased in any number of ways using any synonyms you like, but the core sentiment is the same. Whether it be for the creator, the viewer, or both, the purpose of art is to evoke a feeling or an emotion within someone. My intention, of course, is not to speak for all people, but I really do think that if everyone who has an opinion on art had to agree on a single point, then this would be it. We make art to feel something, we consume art to feel something, and we share art with other people so they can feel something. People chase feelings, regardless of where they lie in the spectrum of human emotion. No one reads Edgar Allan Poe or listens to Elliott Smith to fill their tummy with butterflies. Likewise, no one watches a Goofy movie or plays Super Mario Galaxy to feel heart-wrenching sorrow. It should go without saying that these are all equally valid and important pieces of art. Your affinity for them just depends on who you are and your tastes. Art is the ultimate Swiss Army knife for expressing ourselves. And just like every other tool, it has a purpose. Video games are a form of art. As far as I'm concerned, this is not even debatable. Something that combines visual aesthetics, writing, music, directing, acting in some cases, and a new layer in interactivity is no less a form of art than anything else just because it's held together by numbers and code. And thanks to that added layer of interactivity, games can elicit reactions that aren't possible in other forms of art. For example, feeling like a badass in an action game, or feeling like you have a direct impact on the outcome of a story in a narrative-driven game. Or just the general feeling of immersion and the joy of discovery in games that have giant open worlds to explore. Even if a game's story only has one outcome, that's still different from, say, a film, because a game isn't going to reach its conclusion without the involvement of the player. You can press play on a movie and watch none of it and still go all the way to the end. You are not required. The beauty of games is that they offer all new kinds of experiences that are wholly unique to the medium, and talented developers are always branching out to find new ways to provide those experiences for players. This now brings us to Abzu. Abzu is what I would call art in its purest form. It's not concerned with telling a deep, multi-layered story. It's not concerned with fleshing out its setting or having complex and dynamic character relationships. It's not concerned with conveying a poignant theme or sending an overt message. And while it does in fact contain all of those things I just mentioned, I would argue that none of them are the focal point of the game. To me, Abzu is about the beauty, the spectacle, the adventure, and the raw emotion that you feel while playing it. It downplays all of what we would traditionally define as the aspects of great art and great storytelling, and instead emphasizes the simple aspects. The visual beauty, full of bright and saturated colors that look like a moving painting. The wondrous music that swells and sets the tone for each area and action. The freedom of movement and simplicity of control that make interacting with your environment an effortless endeavor. Playing Abzu is like hiking to the top of a mountain and gazing out over the landscape only to realize that all the petty problems in your life just pale in comparison to the beauty that's right in front of you. It is a moving experience that is unique to the medium of games. It is purely about the emotion that is evoked through nothing other than what's on the screen right in front of you. Abzu favors simplicity in all aspects, even down to a mechanical level. Games are an inherently inaccessible medium to most people because unless you've been playing games your entire life and garnered a game sense of sorts that only comes with sinking hours upon hours into video games, you're faced with the task of having to learn a whole new set of systems and rules every time you try a game. And frankly, that's a pretty onerous task to expect of most people who just want to relax, so their apprehension towards the medium is understandable. But Abzu makes this a non-issue as the controls are so simple that anyone, whether they've been playing games for 10 minutes or 10 years, can pick them up and start exploring the ocean. One of the worst sins a game can commit is to make the controls get in the way of the overall experience, something that Giant Squid Studios clearly understood and something they never allowed to happen. But above all else, Abzu's true strength lies in its universal relatability. The player character of Abzu, known only as the Diver, is entirely androgynous, devoid of any hint of sexual orientation, gender, race, religious affiliation, or any other identifiable feature that could place them in a group. They never speak a word over the course of the entire game, and they don't come from anywhere that exists in our world. The journey through the ocean of Abzu is one filled with astonishment and wonder, something that everyone has experienced in their lives at one point or another. As the symphonies of color and sound wash over you while you explore the deep, you'll be treated to scenarios not unlike the kinds we face in our own lives. There will be moments where you're free to roam and explore at your own comfortable pace. Moments where you'll be swept along with the crowd and feel like you can't slow down. Moments where people we thought our enemies actually become our allies. Moments where you'll be confused and longing for answers. Moments where things will seem grim and hopeless. And moments where you can just break free from it all and feel alive. Abzu is a human experience. It takes you places you've never been and shows you things you've never seen. It's a marvel of sight and sound and never ceases to amaze me every time I submerge myself into its great blue depths. Art like Abzu is something that only comes along every once in a while. It takes the very core of what we value in art and cranks those aspects up to 11. It's something that appeals to me, at least, on a very primal, emotional level. It took one of my biggest fears and turned it into one of the most breathtaking adventures I've had in a game in a very long time. Do yourself a favor and play Abzu. You won't regret it. It's a game very much worth diving into headfirst.